Albert Einstein said, "Don't think about why you question, simply don't stop questioning." Welcome to Curated Questions. I am your host, Ken Woodward. And these questions are not mathematical equations, but rather a resource to encounter personal reflection and growth. As Tupac Shakur stated, even the genius asks questions. Now, let's engage the questioning community. Greetings. Ken Woodward here. Welcome back to Curated Questions. Together, we engage inquisitive humans about how they use questions to navigate and make sense of our world. I am a fellow traveler and pilgrim on this journey, and I'm glad you are here. Today's conversation is with the incomparable Miss Nikki Giovanni. Miss Giovanni is a titan of American poetry, activism, and education. With a career spanning over 5 decades, her powerful voice has shaped literature, inspired generations, and challenged societal norms. Ms. Giovanni has established herself as one of the most influential figures in American literature and the Black arts movement, fueled by participation in the 1960s Black Power movement. Known for her incisive analysis and ability to cut, quote, beyond the bone into one's soul, Ms. Giovanni's work explores race, gender, sexuality, and the Black American experience. She has published dozens of volumes of poetry, essays, illustrated children's books, and edited anthologies. Her list of nominations and awards is exhaustive and spans the written word, music, culture, and film. Ms. Giovanni is an Emerita Professor at Virginia Tech, where she taught for 35 years in the Department of English. She especially enjoyed her 8 a.m. class because she caught her students fresh from their dreams. Following the 2007 campus shooting, she galvanized the healing process with her poem, We Are Virginia Tech. The 2023 award-winning documentary, Going to Mars, combined her biographical story with her deep love of space. Nikki, welcome to Curated Questions.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
When did you first understand the power of questions?
Oh, it's a good question. I don't know when I understood that. I know when I understood the power of words.
Okay.
When you hear people say things that are both insightful and nice, and then you hear people say things that are mean, and you recognize that words have power. And, you know, there's that old expression that kids say, sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words will never touch. And I always thought, no, that's probably the opposite. Words hurt because sticks and stones will heal, and you'll forget, actually. And I'm a small person. So I remember having a fight, actually. I guess I was in the 4th or 5th grade and I'll always remember her, Rose Stinson. I'll always remember that because I lost. I mean, she beat me up. But it was really the words that I remember. You know, you remember a certain thing. It's the words that hurt, though. It's the words when people say mean things to you or call you names. That's why people fight now about what you are called and how you are referred to, how you are spoken to, or how you're. I have friends, and I'm sure we all do, who have PhDs, who are doctors, and they always insist upon being called doctor because they feel that they've earned it. I'm not ego weak on that one. So my students call me Nikki. But when I was teaching, I am retired, by the way. But when I was teaching, my students called me Nikki. I called them when I remembered their names, which I did sometimes I didn't. I called them by their names. They called me by name. You know, that worked. But a lot of people insist upon being referred to in a certain way. It's very interesting, I think. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does. Because that is your answer.
You have to leave in that I am recovering from pneumonia. So all of the things that you are going to say about me or to me, you need to share with your audience. I have pneumonia, and that's why you'll hear me cough every now and then. And you know, pneumonia is it's ugly, and I'm lucky that it wasn't COVID, because I'd probably be dead. But COVID killed quite a few people. But
Yes.
pneumonia is it's kind of ugly, and you find yourself blowing your nose and everybody says, well, it'll be a couple of months, but I'm not doing anything, so it didn't matter. I had to cancel some engagements, but I didn't want to cancel you because I was interested in what you were trying to do with questions. So
that's fantastic. Thank you. I hope that this pneumonia, the body recovers quickly and you're back to full health. I hope that happens quickly. I'm grateful that it was not COVID, and very grateful that you pushed through to make this happen.
Thank you. No, it won't happen quickly. I just hope it happens. So
yeah. Gotcha. And thank you for the disclaimer for the listening audience to know the backstory on any coughing or any noise, what you're working through. That's what it is. It's not more, not less. That is what it is.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, now, how do you think about questions or use them going through your creative process in all of your writings, whether it's the essays, poetry, and the like? How have you used questions either as a tool or as a reflective? How has that worked for you?
I think I'm curious, and I don't know if that's a question so much as I wonder why. Why did somebody say this, or why do we think this way, or why do we do something right now? And in all fairness, without doing politics, because I don't think we want to do like politics, but right now I'm wondering, why do people keep saying that Joe Biden is old? He's only 81. I'm 81. And I just don't think of 81 as being old. And I think of one of our great, speaking of politicians, if I may, one of our great politicians is Queen Elizabeth, or was Queen Elizabeth. She has transitioned now. And Queen Elizabeth was in her late 90s. I think she was 96 or so before she had to turn over some of the power to King Charles. And Charles is not his mother. He is not capable. I don't know if he's capable, but he does not, and he's a lot younger, bring to the world what his mother brought to him. And she was way older, and not to mention putting up with Prince Philip. So it's it's really interesting how people consider something old. I remember when I was, in my 20s, I thought 50 was old. I'll never be 50. And then you get to be 50 and you think, oh, this is nothing. And now I'm 81. And who would have thought 81? I don't think 81 is old. I think 81 is, it's like a good wine. You've kept it in the cellar and it has mellowed. And now it's time to open it up and let's drink it. Let's see what it tastes like.
That's beautiful. Yeah, I just saw my mom this last weekend at a family reunion, and she's late 70s. And we were chuckling about the fact that I gave her the book, A Woman Wears Purple, or something like that, on her 50th birthday. And we were chuckling about the fact that I'm 54. And when I gave that to her, that was considered old at 50. And she was like, I don't feel this. She's like, I am a 12-year-old inside.
You don't feel that. I mean, if you're just in relatively good health. I have this pneumonia because of last year. 80 was very difficult health-wise for me because so much was going on, and I just overworked. The documentary came out, and I was supporting the documentary because I liked the people who made it. And I had to go to London a couple of times, and flying overseas is really difficult. Even more so now, as you know, if you've been keeping up, which I do, talk about questions. I wonder what is wrong with Boeing, because all of their planes seem to be having a lot of trouble, and people are hitting the ceiling. And you wonder, well, what does it take to make people realize, one, put your seatbelt on in an airplane, and two, I don't know what anybody's religion is. It's none of my business. But every time you get on a plane, you have to pray. I really do. To me, an airplane does two things. It takes off and it lands. I don't want to eat. I don't need to watch a movie. I don't need to be entertained. None of that. I just want it to take off and it lands. If I'm lucky, it takes off and lands where I'm trying to go. If not, wherever it lands is going to work for me, because I'd rather it land than it not land. So.
Well said. Yes, in the world of submarines, we always said that we needed to have an equal number of submerges and surfaces.
Right.
If that number is not equal, then we have a problem. Yes.
Absolutely.
Now, how have your questions changed over the decades?
I worry about human beings. I don't think of myself as being particularly pessimistic, but I really think human beings are on their way out. I think that whatever evolution means, we are evolving away from being the two-legged animal, the biggest predator, as it were, on Earth. And I think that's good. I think, frankly speaking, of course, I'm 81, so it's easy for me to say, oh, well, I'll be in here another few years. But I think human beings are somehow a mistake. And I look at us, humans. I look at us and I think, well, what are we missing? And I think the main thing that we're missing is that we're all earthlings. So why have we not accepted the fact that we are all earthlings? We live on this planet, and that makes us all kin, as it were. And we're kin to a number of things. We're kin to a number of mammals and a number of insects. You know, the bees are having a hard time. Well, if we don't have bees, what's going to happen? By the way, I have a bat named after me. And I was totally thrilled. Dr. Baker at the University of Texas, who studies bats, discovered a new bat in Chile. And he called me. I didn't know him. He called me and said, you know, I've admired your work. I never even knew he knew my work. And I didn't know him.
Right.
And he said, I've discovered a bat, and it reminded me of you. And I said, why? You know, and he said, because it has big ears, and you always seem to be listening. I said, well, Dr. Baker, I'm thrilled. That's wonderful. And he said, would you mind if I name it after you? I said, I'm thrilled, which I was. I am. I remain thrilled. And what would we do without bats? If bats didn't eat the insects are going to eat us. It's that simple. And they're going to eat the things that we eat. So why don't we try to get along with the bats? Why don't we try to get along with each other? And that's what I mean. There's probably nothing as dumb on earth as war, because it's just a game that some people play that other people play. And they say, oh, I'm going to send your son or your daughter out to kill somebody else's son and daughter so that we can see who's going to get tired first. What kind of sense does that make? And we're looking at the Israeli genocide against the Palestinians. And what kind of sense does that make? It's awful. Or we look at the Russians with the fighting against the Ukrainians. But we look at Haiti, which practically doesn't make the news, because who cares about what's going on in Haiti? So the fact that I do, by the way, but I'm saying,
absolutely,
you know, it's like, well, who cares? And we watch thousands of people trying to come to the United States. Now, we should be really thrilled about that. We should be thrilled that somebody wants to be bothered with us. They're trying to come to the United States, and people say, we don't want those immigrants. Well, everybody here is an immigrant. Either they came here because they wanted to, or they came here because they were brought here. I am Black American. I was brought here, and I was bought and sold and bought and sold. So what makes that small piece of land more of earth? And it shouldn't be called earth, by the way. And I really believe that we ought to tax the billionaires and, just take maybe 1%, just 1% of their money right now, and put it in a fund and say, whoever can come up with a better name for the third planet from the yellow sun, they will get $1 million. Because we're not earth. We are mostly water. As you know, all you do is look at it. We're mostly water. And of course, lately, the water has been fighting back, because water, like everything else, is alive. So lately, we've been having these terrible storms, and we've been having people go to the beach and parents getting in riptides. And of course, when a mother gets in and father tries to save them, but the water is fighting back. And the rest of the water is saying, hey, we're just going to roll over you and a couple of thousand. And somebody says, oh, no, I'm the sun. So I'm not going to let the water roll over. Water, we're not going to let you do this. I'm just going to burn them up. And so we have people Well, right now in the desert, we have so many people who have just died of heat.
Right.
Can you
Yeah.
imagine dying of, I mean, how can you
It's just
do that?
brutal. That
I
is
mean,
just
of course, I
brutal.
know how you can do that, but you're dying of heat. And everybody, well, they were out there. Well, what kind of sense does that make? But we're on the third planet from the yellow sun. And I have to think, and speaking of questions, I want to think, what is the life in the rest of the galaxy? Because we can't be the only, this is what humans are an error or not a good idea right now. And, well, we're not. And there has to be a life form in the galaxy. And we're very much unprepared to meet another life form because we're unprepared to meet ourselves. Now, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
How we're treating each other does not bode well if we meet someone else.
No, it's stupid. And it has stopped our progress in terms of what life means. And that is my question. What does it mean to be alive? So in some cases, you have people, and I'm not against this, I'm not having that fight, but they'll have brain damage. That's an easy one. And there's no way that we know how to solve that. They have a tumor, they're gone. And somebody says, oh no, we can't take them off of this machine because they should be alive. They have a right to life. Well, you're not alive if you can't talk, if you can't see. What does it mean to be alive? And I look at the kids, and that breaks your heart. I look at youngsters who we know are going to be born with serious deficiencies. I don't mean they're going to have a hand or something, but they're going to be born with something that cannot be cured. And so instead of allowing the mother and father, or just the mother, because it's the mother who's carrying it, to make a decision, should I carry this child? We've decided, the Supreme Court or whatever, the old men, because men don't have pregnancies. No, they make them, but they don't have them. And instead of them saying, honey, what do you think? What will make you comfortable? What should we do? We say, oh, no, you should carry that. A real mother would do that. And so we have quite a few youngsters being born with quite a few serious problems that we solve. And I'm not trying to kill any children. I'm just trying to say it's not my business. And it's not me to judge, because I don't think I would want to be born. I don't think I would want to birth a child that I know is something wrong with, doesn't have a back. So he'll never be able to, I don't think that's fair to the kid, because everybody, oh, that was so brave of you to have. It wasn't. It was stupid of you to put a life form that you cannot take care of. You're going to die before it does. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but those are the questions that I have. Why are we meddling with other people's life?
Has that changed for you over the years as far as how you either think about those questions, or just because of world events or these other occurrences that are happening? Is that what brings these questions up, or have you been wrestling with some of these for a while?
I don't think wrestling would be the word. I've always been a big fan of abortion since I understood sex.
Okay.
I mean, it's the scarlet letter. It's the female that gets sort of blamed for it. She has to go back home to her mother or to the grandmother with the baby, and he goes on to college and lives happily ever after. And I've always thought that's wrong, that she ought to be able to make a decision. And we should not judge women the way that we do, because we like to judge women, but all of a sudden men are just, that's okay. So men need to learn what to do with their penises. You just can't put it in every 14-year-old girl.
It is completely upside down in how we, especially in this country, view this regarding their lack of accountability for men.
Well, not just this country, but men just play games all the time. And war is a game. And Well, now we're fighting with sports, and I'm so glad because I like tennis. I'm too old. I can't play tennis anymore, but I used to play. My mother was a really good tennis player. And I was so glad to see women being able to play basketball. And what's her name? Caitlin, the girl from Iowa. I think she was great. I watched that. I hadn't watched women's basketball probably ever. And I was at a school that we had a team. And it wasn't that I was against the team or anything, just eh. And then she came along and I was watching it and it's like, wow, that's great. And of course, watching Billie Jean King have that wonderful, wonderful match with Bobby Riggs was so,
Right.
it was a lot of fun. And watching women come into control of their own bodies, this is a good idea. And I think that men ought to get over the fact that they don't control women. And I think that's one of the reasons that everybody's against same sex, particularly in terms of women, because I think men don't want to compete with women for the love of other women.
That's an interesting take. I hadn't considered that before. Yeah, and from a control standpoint, historically, as men have been in the driver's seat on these things, that's an interesting take I hadn't considered.
Yeah, no, I think that's what it is. They don't want the competition, so they make it. You're a witch. There's something wrong with you because I cannot compete with you. I am not as nice as you are. I'm not as gentle. I'm not whatever it is. I think men ought to get over it and just realize, okay, we're all here together and we're going to try to be friends and we're going to try to be lovers. And let's see how it works.
What are your thoughts on the changes that have been made over the years as far as true acceptance for those in the LGBTQ plus communities? So I guess it's progress, but a ways to go. And any other thoughts on that?
I think that I've shared my thought because I think it is a question of competition. And I think it is a question of, in all fairness, white men not wanting to compete with any other male. They want to be top, I was about to say top dog, but dogs are very nice and loyal, and I'm not sure about white men. But that's not nice, is it? But I think that, I think it's time that we quit judging people. And I think judgment is, I just think it's a bad idea. And I think that we in America, I don't know that much about how other cultures respond, if I can say that. I know that some Middle Eastern cultures don't allow women to go to college, or not even college, won't allow women to go to school. They don't want them to be educated. And you say, well, what is the purpose of that? But in the old days, the Chinese would bind the feet of women. Women had their feet bound. And you think, well, what is wrong with you? And so we have, I think, moved along. We in America, of course, have had a racial problem. And I think that all of that comes together, but again, with no disrespect, white men are afraid of other people. And so I don't think Black people are not afraid of white people. We find them sometimes unattractive in terms of, and I don't mean physically, I mean the riots. When we start to look at American riots, we're looking at white men. And the latest being, of course, January the 6th. And we're looking at a former president inciting a mob. But then we look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, just to go back in the 1920s, and we look at a mob coming in and destroying what was known as Black Wall Street. And that was just jealousy because the Black people had built it. But Black people have never rejected white people. White people can come to hear our music, can come to dance, but we're not scared of them. We're not afraid of sitting next to them on a bus, so that Mrs. Parks, we want that seat. Well, what are you afraid of sitting next to an elderly? She wasn't old, but an adult Black woman. What's the fear of sitting next to her. And when we finally passed the law, they said you shouldn't. All of a sudden, everybody realized, well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I go to McDonald's and buy a hamburger and sit down and eat. And it doesn't matter who's sitting next to me, because I don't have to be a friend in order to do that. I don't have to be a friend in order to eat at Outback or something like that. So why are you passing a law that says whites only or no blacks allowed? Or, all of that has not harmed Black people as much as it has harmed the white people we are teaching to hate. And so the white people who have benefited from desegregation have been the white people who have let the hate go. They are the better. And we can look at that. I'm not against, well, I am not conservative, but the so-called conservatives are not as healthy or as happy as the liberals. They're always looking for something to be upset about, or something that, the reason my life is a mess is because somebody else did. It's ridiculous. The reason your life is a mess is that you're stupid or you didn't work hard. I just had the occasion, before this hit me actually, to speak for the conference on school teachers. It was nice because it's a interracial, it's just school teachers are every color. And I was saying, I think it's so unfair, and I do, that school teachers, public school teachers, are being required to teach dumb students. Some students are dumb, and it might be, they are. And it might be just good for everybody to be able to say, okay, I can't teach Jack because he can't learn. We need to put him in a special, and we do have some special classes, but everybody's not smart, and everybody doesn't want to go to college for that matter. Some people like other things. And I don't mean to natter, but it's hard to be a school teacher or, for that matter, a librarian. And you don't need a bunch of people who don't read to tell you what books should not be read, because those people haven't even read the book. They have no idea. Right. I was very upset, by the way, with that boy in Florida, the Governor DeSantis. And he's banning books and banning books. And a lot of the books he was banning, of course, were friends of mine. And I'm not a jealous person, but I was wondering, well, I'm offensive. How come my books are not being banned? And I was about to write a letter to say, dear DeSantis, don't you read poetry? Because obviously they didn't. They were banning novels and memoirs. And I thought, well, if you read some poetry, you know that I hate you. So why didn't you do that? But just as I did that, they banned my book, Rosa. And so, yes, I thought, okay, I want to be with the banned people. I want to be with the people on the other side. I don't want to be with, but I recognized what they were doing. They don't read poetry. So they didn't know that perhaps many of us, not just me, but many of us have said terrible things about them or honest things about them.
Honest things.
And they didn't know because they didn't read. And you think, well, why wouldn't you want your child to pick its own books? And why wouldn't you want the teacher to teach what it can? And why wouldn't you want a librarian to have all of the books stacked in the library? And when children come in, I remember my librarian was Mrs. Long. And I would go to the library on Monday. I wrote a book called The Library. I love that book so much because I was living with my grandmother. And I would go on Monday after we did the washing. Grandmother washed on Monday. And grandmother smoked, which nobody does anymore. It's not a good idea. And she would say, Nikki, don't you want to take the books back? Which meant that she really shouldn't want to sit down and have a cigarette because she was tired. And I would take the books and go up, and Mrs. Long would be there. Behind her was a big desk. And she'd say, oh, good morning, Nikki. What are we reading this week? And it was the biggest, it's like, oh, we are reading this week.
Wow.
The librarian and I are, and it just makes you feel as good as when they're a school teacher. And I really loved my 8th grade school teacher, Sister Althea, was a nun, Sister Althea. And my 5th grade teacher, Flora Alexander, was just the sharpest person I knew. And I really loved it when they say, see you tomorrow. And it's such a simple thing, but it always made you know. And there were many of us, my father was a cruel man, there were many of us who were not sure what tomorrow meant. I'm still not sure what tomorrow means, but just see you tomorrow. And it made you think, well, there is a tomorrow. And if my father and my mother fight, but they don't fight because my father beat my mother, there was no fight there. But just knowing that whatever this is, there is tomorrow. And little things that teachers and librarians do, I think they're the most important people, because they're the ones that give us the hope that, yeah, there's something new, and there are questions, which is why I'm sitting here talking to you. There are questions that you can raise that nobody else has raised, and there is a tomorrow. I think it's wonderful.
That's beautiful. So then those examples for the teachers and the librarians, were those early influences regarding questions? Were you talking with the librarians about, I'm interested in this? Was that a conversation per se that you were having with the teachers and the librarians to fuel your curiosity?
Well, I grew up in segregation, as you know, because I'm 81 years old. Yeah. And what I remember the most about Mrs. Long was that she never tried to control, and neither did my grandma. I was living with grandmother and grandpapa. But I remember I've always had an interest in the natural life. I would never be a biologist or something. I don't study like that, but I'm a daydreamer. And I remember wanting to read, now we're in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I remember wanting to read Rachel Carson. And of course, that book was not in the Black library because there was a white library and a Black library. And the Black library was, of course, Carnegie Library. Andrew Carnegie did some wonderful things. And the white library was McGee. And so she had to go to get that. And I remember wanting to read Darwin. And wanting to read Darwin was forbidden in books had been banned longer than we want to admit. And she had to go up to the white library to get that book. And it took me the longest to understand that Mrs. Long probably, I don't know because she never said this, but probably had to stand in line until all of the white people were waited on, and then had to ask if she could borrow Charles Darwin. Wow. And then knowing people, one of the librarians, well, what do you want that for? Who can read that? And so they're going to use words, we were talking words earlier, to belittle her for wanting a book. But she stood there and smiled and yes, ma'am, and yes, ma'am, till she got the book, which she then brought to me, that I then checked out, that I then read what Darwin had to say. And it's kind of, I said, oh, what Mrs. Long must have had to go through for me, but I'm sure not just me. I'm sure that there were other people at the library who wanted books that were not considered, why would the colored, to use that term at that point, why would the colored want this book? And she had to, yes, ma'am, well, we would like to borrow. Do you mind if we borrow? We won't dirty it up. So even now, because I collect my books, I have my books, but I also collect them because they're selling so many books. And every time I see a book that Amazon has, I buy it.
Okay.
And you see the library card. Well, I don't know if you're old enough to, well, you're old enough, but I don't know if you remember the card catalog.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Librarians are so important. And no, she didn't question me about it. No, we didn't discuss it. I just would say, oh, this is what I'm interested in. Because if you're reading Charles Darwin and evolution, and I am interested, I remain interested in evolution, or you're reading Rachel Carson and how we should deal with natural life, the two go together. But I'd had no discussion. Mrs. Long and I weren't discussing it. I would ask for books that I wanted, and she would find a way to get them for me.
Wow.
I was old before I realized what she must have gone through.
Yeah, it's a beautiful appreciation for what she must have gone through and the indignities suffered, but for her desire to pass on the knowledge or to be able to provide to you these resources so that you could grow and to learn. It's beautiful. So shout out to all the librarians out there who are doing the hard work, and especially in this day of book bans. And I very much appreciate that view of why is my book not on the banned list? Love it. Yes. For the things that you have said, you deserve to be banned in this world that's upside down in banning these works. I am new to this understanding of reality. It's only in my mid-40s that I woke up or started to understand. And so your work, among many other works, have been exceedingly helpful. So as I look at the banned books that are out there, or what's being banned, what I would submit is that if you teach all the little white boys and girls like I, all of these things, all of these morals, all of these views of treating your neighbor well, loving your country, loving your neighbor, you do all of those things, and you don't tell the full truth, then we get to middle age and we learn the truth when we start to look beyond, or we delve into some of those books that are banned, and it changes us. If we're willing to receive what the truth is. It has been revolutionary for me to read these works and ingest them for the truths that they hold, all of the truths, the complex truths. And it's been incredibly freeing and disturbing all at the same time. So a reason that I'm so grateful that we're having this conversation.
I had the great pleasure of teaching Kwame Alexander, and I really love the work that he's done. He works very hard too, by the way. And I see him a lot. We're friends now. And I say, Kwame, you've got to slow down. You're working too hard. And he said, that's the kettle calling the pot black, because I learned so much of that from you. But his story, The Door of No Return, is so wonderful. And the work that he did in exploring slavery and its beginnings, the work is incredible because nobody but somebody like me has been doing some things like that. And of course, Toni Morrison's Beloved, and that gets banned all the time. And so I asked my students when I was still teaching, I asked my students one time, I said, and I'm just curious because I'm seeing all of this, what's upsetting. I said, how many of you actually own slaves? And they looked at me, Nikki, I don't own any slaves. What are you talking about? I said, well, I'm sorry, you're right. How many of your parents own slaves? And we didn't own any slaves. I said, okay, how many of your grandparents own slaves? And I'm at Virginia Tech. We didn't own it. I said, well, you must have had some, you're white, some of your ancestors must have. And so we started talking about, but they didn't own slaves. And I said, if you didn't own slaves, then why are you afraid to hear about slavery? Yeah. Because it's not a good idea. And if slavery were a good idea, everybody would want to be a slave. We know it's not a good idea. And so we know that there are reasons that slavery was created. And that goes way beyond the Greeks. It goes way back. It's not something new in terms of the 1800s or something. Slavery goes way back. Anytime a predator can control a weaker person or a weaker group or a weaker whatever, we're going to have slavery. It's a bad idea, but we need to learn about it. If you don't learn about it, then you think, as speaking of DeSantis, well, they being blacks, really enjoyed working. Nobody enjoys working in the hot sun. It doesn't happen that way. Everybody wants to sit in a cool building with their feet on the table.
Yep.
That's reality. That's why you have to admire farmers who now have machines, but at one point did not have machines. So they had, in the European community, they had gypsies that they enslaved. In the North American community, we had, of course, what we call Indians, only they weren't Indians. The reason we called them Indians is that Columbus was lost. She thought he was in India. And we need to teach students. You can be lost and give somebody a name, and that name sticks. And so now the American natives, and even America is going to be a problem because you've got America Vespucci. But even they are saying, well, that's not my name. And good for them. So we need to learn what they call themselves. That's not hard. You can spell, you can get used to it. We all eat corn. I love corn. And it's July now. I don't know when this will air. But it's just nothing like everybody waits for July because July is when the corn, I love it. You can boil it. And, oh, God, it's so good. And what do we learn from that? We learned that from the American natives. They were the ones who introduced corn. But we're the ones who we being Black American, are the ones who introduced the peanut. And in Louisiana, we're the ones who introduced one of my favorite vegetables, okra. We're the ones who brought that. And that means that it's been good for us to come together. Of course, the chimpanzee and the monkeys taught us about bananas. Can you imagine? Who would look at that and say, oh, I want to eat that? It doesn't begin to make sense. So you learn from every living thing, but you also learn that every living thing somehow or another responds to, in some cases we would consider not well, every other living thing. So we are predators, but we are also prey. And so we have to figure out how are we going to get that balance. California's now having a real problem with the bears because the bears are coming and swimming in the, which I love, swimming in the swimming pool. Ain't no damn better for you. If you're going to build a swimming pool and you're living by the ocean, then why shouldn't the bears come? And the bears just like, hey, this is really nice. And
just the right temperature.
Some people, of course, will want to shoot the bear, but it's a bad idea to do that because it makes the bears upset. And then when the bears see human beings, they want to kill them because they know human beings are dangerous.
Yep.
You can't keep teaching people that we're dangerous and then expect, I should say life forms, that we're dangerous and then expect them to like us. I don't think you can.
That's beautiful. Are there any particular questions that you carry with you and revisit, whether that's been over the decades or over a period of time? Are there any questions that you come back to?
I've always come back to the galaxy, to what the life form is in the galaxy. And I'm working with, but not for, NASA. And it's one of the things that I get to ask questions and I get to answer. And they need more writers. They need more poets in space. I know that we have the space station and we have the International Space Station. We have all of that. But we need to really start to look more and more at the galaxy and to see what other life forms could exist. And of course, lately, because of 4th of July just passed, and they saw all of the fireworks going on. And some people saw the fireworks. They have that one where they have all of those people have like sparkles or something, and they jump out of a plane at the same time. So when it comes down, it really is quite beautiful, but it looks very different. So people were calling into the police station and stuff, say the aliens are coming. They were afraid that, oh my goodness, the aliens are coming. Well, we're aliens, of course. What it was is people jumping, but we have so conditioned ourselves to being afraid of anything different that seeing something that beautiful in the sky makes us afraid. They're coming to eat us. Nobody wants to eat us. We're the biggest predator in this particular place. And we don't know what is out there. But I'm always pointing out, and I have to, I will with you, the best thing for space, for the galaxy actually, is Black women, because we get along with everybody. No matter what else it is, you run into a bunch of Black women, first thing they're going to say is, are you hungry, baby? That's the very first thing they're going to do. They're going to feed you. And the only other group of people who respond that way are the Appalachians. If you're in Appalachian, your car breaks down, some white woman is going to say, Paul, they got a flat tire. People don't really have flat tires anymore, but you got a flat tire, and he will stop and come and change that tire, and she will offer you a glass of water because that's usually what they do. And Appalachians are great. They're great people, and we need to study them more. And I say them, I'm just talking about how they came into the Appalachian Mountains and how they learned to live with everybody, with the slaves who were trying to escape slavery, and with the Irish who were being sent over by the British because they didn't want to be bothered with them. And that's why there's a history there. But these are great people. And it was wonderful that these people in what is now called West Virginia split from Virginia, which is what saved the Civil War, because it stopped the Confederacy from being able to go from the Atlantic Ocean to the Ohio River when they had that split. And they were called Kanawha because of the river. These are great people, and they have a great history. And of course, America, United States, has laughed at them because we are embarrassed that these are the people who saved this country. And Black Americans are the people who still, with the exception, of course, of Clarence Thomas, who still believe, oh, Clarence is so stupid. And no, really, he and his wife ought to be tried for treason. And I say that in all fairness, that the Supreme Court is a joke, and nobody's laughing. And it's about time that we got rid of those, that we need to wipe it out and start again. Because the one thing that we know about the so-called Supreme Court is that you don't have to be a lawyer to be on the Supreme Court. So that's the most important thing. And you do have to be a lawyer to be on the federal court or something, but you don't for the Supreme Court because it's there to represent the people. And I think that needs to be explained. I think that people need to learn that. I think from kindergarten, we need to learn what is the system of government under which we live, and what is the Constitution by which we live, and what are we seeking to go forward to? Because right now we're going backwards, and that's a bad idea.
Indeed. I want to come back to the folks in Appalachia. What is the reason, you think, for that response in that example that you used? If you get a flat tire, the white woman, the mom, she's going to say, hey, you need to go help them. What do you think prompts that response?
Well, first of all, Appalachia is populated by the rejects. If you recall, the British sent them out because they didn't want to be bothered. And of course, when you see the mountains, you go from Alabama all the way up to Maine. And this is the best way to go. And we recognize that the people in Appalachia hung quilts. The quilt said, this is a safe house. So those escaping enslavement, if I can use that term, knew that when they saw the quilt hanging, that this was a place that they could go to rest or to get some water. And we also know that in the evening, these same Appalachians would hang a lantern so that, again, those escaping. Now, some of those escaping were probably criminals, and these are not things I know, but many of them were people escaping slavery. And so they were coming, and when they saw that lantern, they knew that this was safe. There was a cellar there or something there that they could hide if they needed to. And I don't think we can overlook the fact that many, and this has not been studied, this is just a question, okay, or an answer that I have, that many of the women, the white women, were lynched because they were helping the enslaved. And we know that many women were lynched during this whole period. But it's something that, if we don't study it soon, by the way, the people who know are going to be gone. But it was something that they felt they should do. And we know that one of the really great white women who does not get credit, and she's not an Appalachian, she's from Detroit, is Mrs. Louisa, who went from Detroit and her family and her children down to the bridge in Selma, if you recall. And Mrs. Louisa was shot by other white men because she was helping people to drive back across the bridge. We also know that Charlottesville we know that the white supremacists drove into that and they killed a white woman. So everybody's saying, well, we are protecting white women. When we shoot black men, we're protecting them. It's not true. They want to control they want to control white women. And I think white women are becoming aware that they are no different from the rest of us, that they are being controlled. And the more they understand that, the more votes we get for an 81-year-old.
I need to do additional study on the route for self-emancipation folks through Appalachia. That's a complete gap in my knowledge, so I will go do some more reading. I just did not put that together before. I just didn't, in my imagination, as you were talking it through, I didn't even have a category for that. So I'm excited that I will go get some learning on that.
Oh, sure.
And to your point on the quilts, I've got some great things that I'm going to go learn on. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, thank you. As I said, that's a great history. And of course, we know the difference between those who live there. I'm a Knoxvillian by birth, so I'm just on this side of Appalachia. And we know who knows it by who calls it, as you just did, Appalachia. And the rest of us is Appalachia. So,
okay, so help me out here. So I appreciate that. Counseling is good. So what is the proper pronunciation here? It's Appalachia?
Appalachia.
Appalachia.
And, yeah, I look at Jeopardy almost every night because I really love it. And I couldn't win on Jeopardy or anything when Alex was still with us. And he had a question. And Alex Trebek, answers, he's got Greek and he's got Latin. He's got just all kinds of languages. But he asked a question about Appalachia. And I just said, oh, how did that happen? Alex is Appalachia. I had to laugh. I'm sure somebody called in and said, this is not how you pronounce that. That's Beautiful. A lot of fun. But you always know, too, the difference. My mother's family is from Albany. And we know that we mean Georgia because Albany is in Georgia. Albany is in New York.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So you never get these things confused.
So I'll go ahead and give you my own. I grew up in Prescott, Arizona. And so everybody that comes from without calls it Prescott. And I'm like, oh, no. You're not a local. I got you.
Yeah, no, that's really funny, isn't it? I mean, it's enjoyable to know little things like that, what you're called and who you call it, family names. Or I grew up with the Isley brothers. Ronald dated my sister.
Wow.
And it was four of them, Vernon, Ronald, O'Kelly, and Rudolph. But nobody called O'Kelly, but those of us who knew it. And I lived in New York for about almost 20 years. And my first book party, O'Kelly came. And I was just so pleased to see him. And I was like, oh, Kelly is great. But everybody else knew him as Kelly because he was the Isley Brothers and he was Kelly. And it's really funny, that what you're called. Or I have a friend who she's a co-hostess on a television show. And her name is Carol Jenkins. She's called Carol Jenkins. But I knew her because she's an old friend as Carol Ann. And so I was in New York and she was doing a show and I was on her show. I said, oh, Carol Ann is so nice. But nobody calls her Carol Ann, but people like me who've known her for, 20-something years. And it's always fun to hear what people call people and how comfortable they are with it. It's great.
Growing up, I was known as Kenny. And then I joined the Navy, and everybody knew me as Woody because the last name was Woodward. And so I even left after 4 years being stationed on the submarine. And when they said my name going off, they were like, I'm sorry, what's your first name? Then post-Navy, it's Ken. Now with caller ID, it's easy. But prior to caller ID, if somebody said, hey, Kenny, I'm like, that would be family. Hey, Woody, that would be Navy. And then, hey, Ken, then that's post-Navy times. Yeah, a little bit of those names that carry with us during those phases or identities that we have.
We're back to words. Because words are important and they say so much about who we are or how we look at things. I think maybe words are the only decent things human beings created. But there are other life forms who speak. We are arrogant and have not really learned a lot. But because dogs mean so much to us, most of us who are dog people, I'm a dog person, most of us can understand a dog. We know when a dog barks because there's somebody there. The other day there was a deer in my front yard. I live in the mountains. There was a deer in the front yard. And of course, Cleopatra, and you probably heard her a little bit earlier, Cleopatra was just going absolutely bananas. And so I had to look up. The deer is wondering, like, what the hell is wrong with that dog, I think. And the deer is just looking because the deer knows the dog cannot get out. Because if the dog had been able to get out, it would have gotten out. So the deer is just kind of looking, and the deer is eating my cucumbers because I have a little garden. But I don't have a garden for me to eat anyway, so it doesn't matter. I have some friends that say, "Oh, I don't like the deer are eating my." I say, "Well, they have to eat something. They don't have credit card." But it was just, I knew the difference. I know the difference when she is barking because someone she knows is coming, or if the UPS man or FedEx man, I know that, and I know some of her language. She knows all of mine because when I go be quiet or sit down, or she knows English better than I know dog. And so it becomes important that you learn language. And I don't know if you're a dog person, but any dog person begins to understand what the dog is saying. And because everybody takes their dog now. And we were in a hotel and we had checked in and everything. And Cleopatra is really a very pretty dog. She's a Yorkie. And not that other dogs aren't, but she is. And people were petting, "Oh, look at your dog. Now, can I pet your pup?" And she's small. And she did. But then a man came in, and it's not personal, but a man came in and she growled. And I thought, I'm not getting on the elevator with that guy. I don't know what she felt about. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I just know she didn't like it. And I thought, I'm going to listen to my dog. If she's going to growl like that, I'm not getting on the elevator with him. Because whatever it is, she doesn't like it. But I love that ad, by the way. On the farmer's dog, I don't know if you... the farmer's dog is a dog food. And the first ad I saw was that the gentleman had invited his girlfriend or something over. And she opens the refrigerator and she says, "Why do you have the dog food in the refrigerator?" And he said, "That's not dog food. That's whatever the dog's name is. I forget." And she said, "Well, it's dog food." And then the next thing you know, they're slamming the door. She's outside. They slam the door. She's gone. And he says to her, "I knew something was wrong with her anyway." I just love that. I really just, it's one of my favorite ads because, if somebody doesn't appreciate your dog, there's something wrong with it. Or if your dog doesn't like, something's wrong. That's the best way to find out. Should I be dating this guy or should I be hanging out with these people? If your dog doesn't like him, get rid of him because your dog is telling you something and you just don't know dog well enough to know, protect myself from these people.
Yep. Indeed. We've got a couple pups over here sleeping on the bed right now, and I've learned to pick up on the cues of the dogs telling me what needs to happen and when. Shifting topics a little bit to spirituals. Because I know that you deeply appreciate the spirituals. And is there any connection, or how do you see any intersection with questions in the spirituals? Do you see the spirituals addressing questions, asking questions? What are your thoughts?
I think, first of all, what we call the Negro spiritual has a connection, which again, I have not studied it, but I hope some young PhDs that come along do, definitely has a connection with the fairy tales, because they were both created by people who could not, I should say, read or write, and who were prevented from reading and writing. So they had to find a way to tell their children and their children's children, this is what the world is like. So this is why we get the fairy tales that we have kept hundreds of years now. What's her name? Little Red Riding Hood and all of that, Snow White. We've kept them for years. And we've kept the spirituals for a couple of hundred years for the same reason. So we have questions that the spirituals raise, like wade in the water. What are we talking? What are we talking here? We're talking, in my opinion, we're giving some direction. And because it sounds innocent, nobody wanted to prevent them from them being my ancestors, way back. But nobody thought that it was given direction. And of course, the biggest question I think that the spirituals raise, a Negro spiritual raise, is what does it mean to pray? Because that comes up a lot. Lord, teach me how to pray. Or I'm standing in the need of prayer. Prayer is always there. I'm not sure what prayer means. And I'm not the only one who doesn't know what they meant when they would say prayer. But prayer is important. And what I love about the spirituals, the same way that I love the folktales, essentially is that they're not mean. They're not trying to hurt anybody's feelings. None of the spirituals are about revenge. They're all about learning to accept and learning to find a way through this, learning patience and learning not to be afraid. I love them because, one, they are, for lack of a better word, simple, but not as in stupid or something. But there's songs that can easily be passed along. And if you can tell anybody something that they should remember, there's an old, if anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're a child of God. And so we taught that to our children way back in slavery, when probably whether the child knew it or not, that's going to be the last thing they heard from their mother. If anybody asks you who you are, tell them you're a child of God. And that's something that's going to come all the way down to my generation, that a lot of things that people want to make matter don't matter. I mean, I am so uninterested in DNA and all of that, who are your ancestors? It doesn't matter. I was on a television show last year sometime, and the woman said to me, well, you know where you come from? And I was not in a bad mood because I came very close to saying my mother. And I said, no, I haven't looked into it. I mean, what a stupid question. Of course I know where I came from. I came from my mother. And there was obviously a father involved, but that was his decision. And if he didn't want to know me, I didn't want to know him. So I'm not looking for somebody. I'm not interested in who's not interested in me. I'm not interested in who doesn't love me. I have no interest. I have friends, though. And that's, again, why I'm on this show, despite coughing my way through it. It just interested me. But I'm just interested in why people are always, well, I want to know who I'm kin to. Well, you're kin to the people who love you. That's who you're kin to. And the rest of those people, whatever the DNA or whatever it is, has no interest. And I have very little interest in other people. And I don't ask, which is why we're here, a lot of questions. And I get teased by the people that I know, including my mother, and all the way up to the people that I live with now. I get teased about that. Well, you never ask a question. Well, if you want me to know something, you would tell me. And if you don't tell me, then you don't want me to know. So why would I ask you something to make you either lie to me or intrude? Why would I intrude? Either I'm accepting you and our relationship, or I'm not. But all of that, well, who exactly are you? Or what did you do? Or what business is it of mine what you did? My only business is what you're doing. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's a new perspective for me, because I remember when you were talking at the celebration of James Baldwin's birthday, what would have been his 100th birthday, and your, for my term, insistence on you were not going to interpret Baldwin for anyone. It was, If he wanted to tell you, then he would have already told you. So that's in my mind. And then with your insistence and comfortableness in the reality of where you are currently at, you are not seeking out, whether it's to know the biological history of ancestry or not, and just being content with this is the reality of today and this is here. I just haven't encountered that perspective. Have you always been, or where do you think that comes from the standpoint that what we mostly encounter is folks wanting to know many of those different answers and wanting to know where I came from, but your comfortableness in just saying, I am here and that is sufficient, that's remarkable.
Well, thank you. I think that because, one, I recognized, I don't know, maybe 10, 11 years old, that my parents' marriage had nothing to do with me. So that was one of those. Hearing them, if you said, Nikki, what were you doing at 11 o'clock on Saturday? I would say I would be listening to my father hit my mother. So I knew that would not be, I knew that this is not a good idea. So I also knew that I had to let it go somehow. And of course, the response, and many people take that, is I could kill my father or I could leave. I knew if I killed him, everybody would be mad at me. And they were like, why did you kill him? I understood, So I thought, well, I don't need that. But I had a grandmother. And of course, I had a grandmother and grandfather, but I thought, well, I've got to find a way to get someplace that's safe. Mm-hmm. And so I talk about, I'm not a fan of safety, but I want to get someplace away from them. And what they did with their life was their business. But obviously what I'm doing with my life is going to be mine. But once I was able, and I was, my godmother passed and left me $50. That was real money. And I could take a train. I'm writing a story about that. I could take a train to Knoxville because we were living in Cincinnati at that point. And I could take a train to Knoxville. And I did, and a longer story, but I finally asked my mother, could I live with them? And she said, well, his name was John Brown. I'll have to ask John Brown. And again, it took me the longest to ask. She never asked John Brown anything. She said this is what was going to happen. But I was able to live with them. Well, if you're going to leave something, it's gone. And so I left my parents, so they were gone. And if I dwelled on it, I would be unhappy. So the best thing to do is to let it go and to deal with what I'm dealing with. Well, my grandparents, and I dedicated a book to them, my grandparents showed me what love is, because grandpapa really loved grandmother and she loved him. And the one thing that I'll always remember is that grandmother loved pineapple, and grandpapa never allowed her to go to the market. This is when there were markets, before we had grocery stores. Okay, and he never allowed her to go to the market. And I finally did one day say, because I said I didn't ask a lot of questions, but I did one day say to him, grandpapa, how come grandmother never goes to the market? Because I was just curious. And he said, well, Nikki, if I let her go, he said, your grandmother is a very pretty woman. And I agreed, because she was. And he said, if I let her go, somebody would say something to her. Then she would come home and she would say, John Brown, the chicken man, said something to me. He said, and then I would have to go up, because that's my wife, you understand. I said, yes, I'm looking at, and he was a good storyteller. He said, I'd have to go up and take my gun and shoot the chicken man. Then the white people would be upset about that, and they would have to come down and lynch me. Then the black people would be upset about that, and they would have to fight the white people. He said, you see the problem? So if I go to the grocery store, we don't have a problem. And I said, oh.
Wow.
Grandpapa was fun. I mean, he was a Latin scholar, really a brilliant man. But I had to laugh about that. I always kept that in mind. And grandmother loved pineapple. So that was the other thing, that when pineapple was in season, we lived on Mulvaney Street, which no longer exists. And when you live up, in order to get to the house, you had to come up the steps. But before he got to the top of the steps, because he was so thrilled, he would say, her name was Luvinia. Luvinia, they had pineapple. And there was something in his voice that I understood. This is love. He wanted to bring her a pineapple. It meant something. And it's something that I remember, something I still remember. And the other day I actually ate, I don't like pineapple. And the days that they had pineapple, we made our own ice cream in those days. And I would always hate it when they had pineapple because I knew that he would make, because he made the ice cream, he would make pineapple ice cream. And I didn't like pineapple ice cream. But the other day, I forget where I was, and they had pineapple. And I said, I should eat some pineapple for grandmother. And I did. But I learned a lot about love. And it's one of the reasons that my favorite movie is The Godfather, because it opens with Don Vito, with Corleone, petting a kitten. If you remember that, he's petting the kitten.
Yeah.
And the first line is, I believe in America, and he's petting that kitten. And I thought, that's exactly what Black people do. We believe in America, and we love something. I love that. I don't know where Puzo, of course, Puzo's gone. I didn't know him, had no opportunity. I don't do the West Coast that much, so of course I don't know Marlon, even though Marlon lived in New York. I don't know any of those people, but I thought, yeah, that's very Black of Mario Puzo, and I wonder where he got it from.
That's beautiful. So I wrote down something. You mentioned you're not a fan of safety.
I'm sorry.
You mentioned that you're not a fan of safety just a moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand on that?
I think that people overstress their need to be safe, which allows them to do, I think, really ugly things. And I'm thinking particularly right now of Israel in wanting to be what they call, what the prime minister called safe, feels that he can destroy, that he can commit genocide against the Palestinians. And when he does that, he will be safe. But there'll be nothing less safe than what is being done right now to the Palestinians. It's just a terrible idea. And I, like most people, I'm struggling with, I'm not fighting because I don't fight disease, because disease will always win, but I'm struggling with this pneumonia. And I'm sincerely hoping that I get over it, that I am safe from this disease, but I'm not going to fight it because it's a disease and it'll win. So I'm going to try to find a way to live with it. And I think part of what we as a nation here in the United States have not understood, and it's a part of what makes Black Americans a great people, is that we were not so worried about our safety that we fled this country. When 1865 came and Marcus Garvey, who was Jamaican, Garvey said, well, we're going to go back to Africa. And as you know, most Black Americans said, I'm not going back any place. This is my country. And yeah, I know I live in Mississippi, and in Mississippi, they lynch people or they shoot boys in the back. I mean, a lot of ugly things have happened, but we haven't allowed our need to be safe overcome our need to say, no, this is where we belong. This is our country. This is our land. We light sparklers on the 4th of July like everybody else. We believe in the Constitution. And I sincerely dislike Make America Great Again, because America has not been great. America can be great. So if you want to wear a cap, let's make America great. And by making it great, we include everybody. So I don't want to ever have to make a decision between my safety and me having to kill or hurt. And I said that about my dad. You know, I should have probably killed him, but the best thing to do is just let him die. And he did eventually. And I went back to live with my mother. And I wrote a poem called I Married My Mother. But I don't think that I should have to make that decision. I don't think that I should have to drop a bomb on people because I am afraid, because I want to be safe. I just want to live a normal, whatever normal is. I want to live my life out. And at some point, as we all know, the phone's going to ring and you have to answer. There's no question. If you were born, you're going to die. So it's not something that I have to do. And it's not something actually that I can fear. It is something that I might find inconvenient, that I want the house to be paid for because I don't want to leave my debt. I mean, there are some things that you don't want. You don't want to leave your troubles. You want to leave your joy.
That in itself is just a gorgeous statement. Wow. Don't want to leave your trouble. You want to leave your joy. That is beautiful. And also thank you for filling that out on regarding safety, because that is a commonly used word that's not well defined. What is that? How do I feel safe? Maybe far different than anyone else. And so now this becomes this nebulous term that's unobtainium.
It was terrible. You know, the sharks, one of the reasons we have so many sharks on the east coast of the United States is slavery, because the slaves died and they threw the bodies over. And so we fed the sharks from Africa to the United States. These are things you know. And now we have the sharks dealing with the fact that the water, we have climate change. And the sharks have been eating people again. And of course, one of the problems of eating the people is that people are upset with the sharks and they want to go out and shoot them because they say, well, I want to be safe in the water. Well, it never occurred to them the sharks would like to be safe in the water too. That's when we talk about safety. Everything wants to be safe. I saw this deer in the front yard, and the deer would like to be safe. Yeah. And of course, I have a little dog, and so the deer recognized, you don't know what they're thinking, but the deer recognized a little dog is behind a door and it can't get out. You know, the skunk, of course, comes, and I only have 2 acres, but I have a lot of wildlife living in here. And the skunk comes, and of course, Cleopatra knows better than to bother the skunk, because the skunk wants to be safe too. And the skunk will say, you know, okay, mess with me one more time. And it's really funny watching the interaction of life. It's really those who know that I am, as it were, safe, and I am not, and how they escape. Because I've got groundhogs, of course, and they run. People don't realize how fast the groundhogs are. But when Cleopatra, her knee had to be operated on recently, so she's not in the yard anymore. But when she could be in the yard, she could chase a groundhog, and didn't realize the groundhog is really faster than she was. So it's not something she knew. And she used to chase the squirrels, which is one of the problems. You know, squirrels are just all over the place. And I remember when she was a puppy, she's 7 years old now, but when she was a puppy, the squirrels came on the deck and she started chasing. And the squirrel ran up a tree, and Cleo didn't know that she's a dog. And so she ran up, and then all of a sudden she realized she wasn't that far out, but she realized, oh, I'm a dog. Dogs do not run up trees. And of course she fell. And I told her, you stupid fool, don't you know that you're a dog? And she just looked at me like, don't talk to me like that. And she just kind of limped away. And I know she was angry with me for a while, because I shouldn't have called her stupid fool, but she didn't chase another squirrel. She won't let them on the deck, but she didn't run. If they would run up the tree, they were. And so it's interesting to watch all of it. And you and I should do the same thing. We should recognize there's no safety. There's only, how do we get along? And I have a fish pond. And of course, the birds want to eat the fish. But the pond was made so that the fish can go under the rocks. So the birds can't get them. Is that so? But the birds can drink and wash themselves,
Yeah.
and so everybody's happy. That's all
Beautiful.
just trying to, for these years. And of course, now there was a time that we were talking earlier that 50 was old. And if you lived to be 50, it was like you had a long life. But we're living into the 80s and 90s. Willie Mays was 93,
Yeah.
and he was a sports person. So we're living much longer. And I think it's probably a good idea if we're learning something while we're living, because we have to do better.
I appreciate that phrase that you use, it's a good idea, because that comes up often. And it's a reminder that much of what we live with, they're ideas that we've implemented. So therefore, if something is not right, it's an idea. We can reinvent it, we can change it, and we can do things a new way. We don't have to stick with the same old ideas that got us where we are today.
That's true.
So how do you view courage? And I don't know if it's changed or not, but what do you think about the word courage?
It's interesting. I think of myself as courageous, but I don't think of myself as foolish. In the news last night, and it made me think, I didn't realize you were going to bring this up, but there was a car on Pennsylvania Turnpike or something that had caught on fire, and the driver was in it. It couldn't get out. And other people stopped and tried to pull that door open to get him out to save his life. And I thought, that's courageous. And then I thought about it and said, would I have tried to pull that door? I would have stopped because maybe I could help. But to see that fire, I'm not sure that I would do that. Now we're back to safety. We're back to whose life. And there would be another term that we haven't used, which would be duty. Do I have a duty to this stranger who somehow has his car on fire? Or do I have a duty to the people who need me to be at home? So I do have a phone. I'm going to dial 911, but I don't know if I'm going to walk into a fire. So I have great admiration for first responders, because I think it takes a lot of courage to respond to something that may in fact kill you, whether it's a fire or whether it's a murderer, whether it's someone with a, what are those things? Shotgun, the ones that go fast,
Automatic rifles and that kind of thing? Okay.
Because all of that has got to be a little unnerving. And it's not uncourageous to say, I don't think I can go into that situation. I don't think that's something, in Titanic, I don't know if you keep up with the Titanic, everybody does. There was a Japanese gentleman on the Titanic, and it was children and women first, and then the men. So we lost quite a few, British particularly, but there was a Japanese gentleman, and he forced his way, as it were, onto the boat, and one of the lifeboats, and saved his life. But when he went back home, the Japanese have a great sense of courage. And so he was ostracized because they thought he was cowardly. And I thought, well, that'd be hard to be on a ship that was going down if you could find some space. And they never did forgive him for being alive. And I thought, well, I don't know. I don't think I would have pushed him off. And I know that I would have spoken to him if I was Japanese and I knew Japanese, and I would have been, good morning, or how you doing today, or something, because it's easier to judge why he wanted to be on the lifeboat than it is to say, well, wasn't that brave? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's really difficult to judge what people do and don't do. And some things that you say, well, that's foolish. Why did they do that? And then some things you say, well, I asked my students, by the way, at one point, I know what kind of slave I would be, or I feel that I know what kind of slave that I would be. But I asked my students, and the majority of Virginia Tech is white, so the majority of my students are going to be white. I said, have you ever thought about what kind of slave owner you would be? Because we're always talking about what slavery has done. What kind of owner would you be? And so we had to write about that. We had to deal with what kind of owner would I be? And it's really, you don't know. I know that I would, if I were a slave, do everything in my power to not be whipped or lynched, because that's uncomfortable. Or as Elmer Gantry said, I love Elmer Gantry for that one line when the preacher hits her and Gantry hits him back and said, don't you know that hurts? I love that line. Don't you know that hurts? So I know I would do everything I could to not be in that position. I know I would make up the bed right. I know I would learn to iron. I know I would learn what the language is necessary. But I feel that way right now. If a policeman, and not if, but when, because I used to get tickets. I don't speed anymore. But a policeman's name is Sir. Your hands go on the wheel.
Yeah.
Some things you're not going to be bothered with. He has a gun and he may be crazy. His foot may be hurting today, or his wife may have messed up the oatmeal. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with him, but I know he pulled me over, and I can pay for a ticket, but I can't buy my life. So, and I don't want to say, just give me the damn ticket and go away. It's just like, yes, sir. No, sir, sorry. And you're just sitting there waiting for this fool to leave you alone. But he's not a fool, because if somebody else were doing something to me, he's what I would call.
Yeah.
So it's a question of, what are we doing? It's all a question of circumstances. If I was in my house and some idiot was standing there with a knife and going to cut my throat, I would be doing everything I could to press 911.
Yeah.
For the same guy who, if I were driving down the highway at 80 miles an hour, would give me a ticket. You have to figure out, we're back to, how do you balance these things out? Is that?
Yeah, the balance and... Yeah, all these things can be true at the same time.
Yeah, and you have to recognize that there's no right or wrong. And I listen to Donald Trump, who's always got a easy answer. I would do this. There are no easy answers, which is why I am a big fan of Joe Biden, aside from the fact that Joe was 81, and I think that's a great age. You have to recognize there's just no easy answer. You're always trying to find a way to get along, to make this work. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. Then you look for another answer. Otherwise, you're just spending your time. You got this thing going between a loudmouth and a leader. I happen to think that Biden is a leader, because I'm tired of the loudmouth saying, oh, this is easy. Nothing. If it was easy, it would be done. And the one thing that my friends, and family, I have very little family left right now. We're a small family, only 7 of us left right now. But the one thing that they are not allowed to do, that they know that they are not allowed to do, is that nobody's allowed to say to me, remember. You just can't say that. Don't you remember when? And if I remembered, you wouldn't have to tell me. Of course I don't remember. I'm 81, and some of the things that you remember, and my youngest cousin, I only have one female cousin, and she's just 50, and what she remembers of even our grandparents, I didn't know them, because when she was being born, I was going to graduate school.
Okay. Right.
So we knew, and when we talk, and we talk frequently, she just had her birthday, but we talk, and it's like, no, I don't remember. So if you're telling me something, tell it. But I don't remember. And I never ask anybody, but we're back to that. I don't ask. Because if you want me to know, you would tell me.
Hmm.
And if you told me once before and I didn't remember, then you don't need to remind me that I didn't remember. Why are you trying to embarrass me?
Okay, right. Yep. Fair enough. Let's transition. So let me give you the question, but then I want to ask you to read your poem, Ego Trippin'. So the question or the direction I'd love to spend some time is about how do you use questions to bring to bear the wisdom of Black women? So that's the direction I'd like to go. But if we could start with Ego Trippin', then I think that's a beautiful way to make this transition.
I remember the poem. I should remember the poem.
And
I can read Ego Trippin', but I want to read this poem first.
Oh, yeah.
It's called The Yellowjacket.
Mm.
And it's because I sat out on my deck in the evening with a glass of champagne and watched. The Yellowjacket. We pause in our day before completion of evening chores. I to cook dinner, and you, I'm not sure what you do. I empty the bird baths, always worrying a virus or germ or unpleasant bacteria may lurk to do fatal harm to those who only bring joy, to those who only bring their voices in joy and thanksgiving for fresh water. And you buzz and, quite frankly, annoy me. And I go about this duty, fulfilling a contract that was never signed and not at all enforceable, but nonetheless a cheerful duty to our feathered friends, recognizing each tree gone, each bush removed for a deck or patio has left the place less welcoming. I hope the birds accept this clean water as a suitable replacement. I swatted you, worried you will sting, causing my throat to swell, blocking my air, or some other unknown danger humans attribute when we hear buzzes. You wait, buzz by, and wait again until the water is filled, where you can sit majestically on the edge and drink. We are not friends, the Yellowjacket and I. You will not be tamed nor trained. Your sound will offer no comfort, nor your numbers any sense of safety. Yet, in this evening, watching you drink, I am in awe of your self-possessed beauty.
Mm.
I love that poem so much because I think about the Yellowjacket, and I sit there, you know how you sit and you watch something, because people don't like any buzz. You know, that if it's there, it's like, oh no, I have to kill it. And I was watching the Yellowjacket, and I do my bird baths, and you watch the birds, and the birds will come, and then of course the squirrels come too. But the squirrels are not as interesting. Even though I talk about squirrels, I have a neighbor, by the way, who I live on a mountain, but it's a neighborhood, and he hit a squirrel, and it's because he was late. That was his problem. He was late going to work. And I'm never late going to work because whenever I get there, I'm on time. And he was speeding down. You know how squirrels stop and look and then go. Yes. And he was speeding down, and there was a squirrel, and it was doing a squirrel thing, and he hit it. And of course, it upset me. I was very much aware of it, and upset me. And when I saw him later that evening after work, I said, oh, I see you murdering squirrels. He said, Nikki, I didn't murder a squirrel. I said, well, squirrel's dead. And you hit it. I call that murder. He said, I don't think so. But we have had, we're not friends either, by the way. But we're not unfriendly, but when I see him, I said, well, still murdering squirrels? And of course, he doesn't think that's funny, and it's not a joke. But I think he goes down the mountain a little slower. But it's one of those things. Where the squirrel's going? They're just trying to cross the street. Yeah. And if you are late, you will remain late. You can speed, you can do whatever you want. But if you're late, you're going to stay late. And that's the way I feel about it. And I'm not indifferent. But once late, you just can't make up time. Time, and speaking of questions, time cannot be made up. Wherever time is, That's all it is. It's there. You can't make it up. You can't find more time.
Right.
It's just there. And so it really makes you mad when you see people speeding. People here all want to be NASCAR drivers, and they're not. That's what causes accidents, because they're trying to do something somewhere, but you can't make it up. It's so simple.
Yeah.
You just have to use it. But this is ego tripping.
Beautiful.
There may be a reason why. I was born in the Congo. I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx. I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light. I am bad. I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah. I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst. My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth veins created the Nile. I am a beautiful woman. I gazed on the forest and burned out the Sahara Desert. With a packet of goat's meat and a change of clothes, I crossed it in 2 hours. I am a gazelle, so swift, you can't catch me. For a birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son, Hannibal, an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on. My son Noah built new ark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day. I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intoned my loving name. All praises, I am the one who would save. I sowed diamonds in my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The filings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels. On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct. I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went. The hair from my head thinned, and gold was laid across 3 continents. I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended except by my permission. I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky. I like that.
That is beautiful.
It's fun. What's funny is now grown women now, and I mean grown, being 81 becomes a different thing. So people in their 40s will come up and say, when I was in 5th grade, I had to learn that poem.
Wow.
And it really is funny. I'm thinking, wow, has it been that long? But grown people have memorized that poem, grown women particularly. They talk about it. So it's a lot of fun. I'm glad I like it.
Yes. I love it because I think it's a helpful reminder. Yes.
It's a good use. I was a history major. And so you can see, and a lot of my work has history in it, and you can see the history in that. And so it's a lot of fun to listen to how people keep themselves whole.
So to come back to that question, how might you have used questions to bear the wisdom of Black women, to bear the wisdom of a Black woman?
Oh, I like the plural on that one. I like Black women. You sit around, and as I said, I was very fortunate to live with my grandmother because she and her friends were the backbone of the civil rights movement. And that's something that is only beginning to be recognized, what the women did in the civil rights movement. We know the men, but we have not given, and I don't want to say credit because it's not a question of credit or not credit, but my grandmother belonged to, I don't know, 1 million clubs. She had, of course, her own bridge club because Black women played bridge. But then Grandpapa was a deacon. So she was a deacon's wife, and they had meetings. So they had Sunday school. She taught Sunday school. They had a couple of other clubs, and they had teas and stuff. So there was always something going on, either in our home or in somebody else's home that we went to. And I would go with her. Grandmother couldn't drive.
Okay.
She never did learn how to drive, but she bought a car. I don't know how she did that, by the way. We didn't have that much money, but she bought a car. It was a black Plymouth. I'll never forget it. And I came home one day from school, and there was a black Plymouth sitting in front of the house. And I was wondering, oh, who's here? And when I walked up, I kind of looked around, and nobody was there. And I said, Grandmother, I saw a car. I thought somebody was here. And she said, I bought a car. She was thrilled. And I said, Grandmother, I, I didn't think you, and I was about 15 then. I said, I didn't think you could drive. She said, I can drive. I just don't know how to back up. And that's the way she looked at it. And so I knew, even at that age, if you can't back up, you can't drive. So it was a question of how long will it take her to recognize that buying this car was not a good idea. And I don't know why Grandpapa let her do it, but he really let Grandmother do whatever. I mean, he just, oh, Luvinia wanted a car, so we went and bought a car. I mean, that's the way he looked at it. And she finally had to give it up because you can't drive if you can't. If you can't do
that
reverse.
It's important to know how to do, yes.
It was so funny because she was so very pleased with, I can drive, I just can't do reverse. Grandma, that's not the way that it goes. But it's really funny. But Grandmother, so we walked. We're in Knoxville, Tennessee. Now there's a long way to, so we walked, and I would always go with her. I don't know why I would always go with her. I think to keep her company. She would say, Nikki, do you want to go? And the answer to any of those questions was yes, whatever it was. Grandpapa would take me down, by the way, to the railroad station. And he would say, do you want to go watch the trains come in? And the answer to that was yes, though I had absolutely no interest in watching the train. And we would walk down to the Southern Railroad station. But what I remember, because I've always been someone to watch. I almost named a book that, because I watch all the time. And I remember watching Grandpapa take an envelope out of his pocket and pass it to one of the porters. And I wondered what was in there. And of course, I found out later, two things were there. Grandpapa was a Latin scholar. So he, among others, he was not alone, translated a lot. The law is written in Latin. And
gotcha. Wow.
They translated a lot of the law, passed it along to Thurgood Marshall. And because they didn't want, for lack of a better word, white people to know what they were doing, the churches would take up a collection for the civil rights movement. And because Grandpapa was a deacon and everybody knew that he was going to be an honest man, this is not going to be a guy who's going to steal or anything. Right. He would take that and he would give it to the porters, and they would pass it along to the bankers of the civil rights movement, and they passed the money along to the NAACP. And that included, of course, Nat King Cole, the singers and the musicians, Louis Armstrong and them, because they were all on the train. And so they would give them, it's one of those, pass this along to the boy, and the boy being Thurgood Marshall. But they didn't want the white people to know Nat King Cole, you never heard anything about King Cole being a civil rights person, but he did give money and stuff. But he couldn't have done what he did if they had known.
Right.
Boy, that's a terrible sentence. He couldn't have done what he did if they had known what he was doing. And of course, everybody loved Louis Armstrong, and Louis Armstrong gave a lot of money also. And they passed it along to the porters, and the porters passed it along. And again, an amazing and wonderful thing is that the porters, there's never been any thought at all that the Pullman porters took any of that money. There was just nobody, you look it up and stuff, you talk to people, nobody ever thought, it just never got said. And they did something else that was wonderful, by the way. Speaking of the Pullman porters, they took a game that I play with friends here now called Bid Whist. And they're the ones who took Bid Whist across the country because they were on the trains all night. And they were the ones who took jazz because, again, they were the ones who took jazz through the United States. And, of course, the soldiers are the ones who took jazz to Europe. So, it's really, again, it's really amazing how we pass things along and how we share things and what we learn from each other.
Right. Tendons and sinews and connectivity of the living community and just passing the stories, information, funds, everything. That's beautiful. Well, to go in the opposite direction of the opening in your 1968 poem, Nikki Rosa, what are you currently witnessing across the Black American diaspora that brings you joy?
Well, all I know is that we're Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that there's some tension. I just like seeing the number of shootings. I live away now from Roanoke. I live about 40 miles from Roanoke. And they've had, I don't know, black guys are killing black guys. Mm-hmm. And if I didn't like white guys killing black guys, I don't like the black guys doing any better. So I think that's not a good idea. But I think that, again, life is a good idea. Mm. And I think looking forward to life in the galaxy, and that I would say the galaxy more than space, because we live in space. The planet that we live on is in space. And we forget that this planet is not solid, that what we're living on is actually gas, because something is holding, and that has to be pressure, is holding, in my opinion, is holding water up.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know, but it's not a rock. It's something else. And because I'm a Black woman, I'm a big fan of meeting strangers. And I meet strangers all the time. I met strangers as I was purposely brought to America. And mm-hmm. I'm thrilled to meet the idea of meeting strangers as we go into the galaxy. So I think that we're the right people to do that, because I think we're, as I say again, we're not afraid of that which is different.
Yeah.
And we've made it with everybody. Somebody said, you know, Nikki, if you go into space, you know, something's going to rape you. I said, no, something has raped me in the United States. So that'll be fine. I do know that if I get pregnant by what we would call an alien, I know that whatever I birth, I will love. I will name it, and I will love, because that's what Black women do, which is why we have to send us into the galaxy to meet people, because we're perfectly capable of loving anything that we have.
Are there any questions that infuse your love of space or the galaxies?
It's just, isn't it exciting to you? You know, the stars haven't changed. The stars have been the same. So it's just exciting to know that something has been around that long that has not changed, which means that there's some life that we are not being aware of. And it's just illogical if we are the only life form in this galaxy. And we know now that there are other galaxies. We have learned that we are not the only galaxy. So I think it's incredibly exciting. I really do. I had lung cancer. And when I started working with NASA, just as you need a poet, and it was one of those things, I wanted to go into the International Space Station, of course, because who wouldn't? And Dr. Bolden said, you know, Nikki, I could send you to the space station, because that's a pretty safe thing to do. You know, we've had an accident here or there, but we have more on the road than we have in space. And he said, I could send you, but I wouldn't be able to bring you back. And I said, well, why? He said, well, you know, you had the cancer, because they took my left lung out, and your organs would move around and it would kill you. And his name is Charles, and I really love Charles. I carry a picture of him around. I said, Charles, I don't know how to tell you, but if I was born, I'm going to die. So this is not something that's preventable. So why don't you send me to the International Space Station, and I'll just stay until I'm in at that point, I thought until my early 80s, but I'm in my early 80s. So now I pushed it to early 90s.
So we're going to push that out just a little bit. Yes.
And
yes.
I said, and when I transition, when I pass, just open the door and let me go into space. Let me go around. And then people can look out. You know, some child can be sitting, looking out the window saying, ooh, there goes Nikki. And I'll just be going around and around. And a couple of thousand years from now, somebody will tell my story. And that's what gets you excited about it, that I have a story in space.
Well, then, not that I'm hurrying that day, But if all that comes to pass, if you can have like wrapped in aluminum or something like that, so as you're going, you'll look like one of the other satellites, and we can identify you that much more and be grateful for your place in the heavens.
That'd be fun, wouldn't it?
It would be amazing.
It
That'd
would
be amazing. Last year, I spent some time on Whidbey Island, which is just north of Seattle. And on the way back, I stopped intentionally, and this was in the middle of the night, and just looked at the skies because I'm so accustomed to light pollution. I literally could not think of the last time that I had looked at the night sky unpolluted by light. And this was a very remote place that I was at. And it was glorious. I will always remember that 10, 15 minutes, whatever it was, of just parked on the side of the road, staring up at the sky and just seeing the diversity of color and just the magnitude. So yes, I have an understanding.
Yeah. I loved Iceland. I went to Iceland a couple of years ago. I really love Iceland for the same reason. And it can be it's quiet, first of all, not all of it, but most of it, because they only have Reykjavik, it's the only city. And so it's quiet. And you get a dark sky. Of course, you get the northern stars too. But it's just wonderful to know. I mean, something has to be living. Something has to be living there, because anything else is illogical. And the universe cannot be illogical. And if you were religious, you would say God. God cannot be illogical. And of course, people say, well, God could not have made a mistake in human beings. I think God could make a mistake because he was thinking, I'm lonely. And so he decided to make life forms. But I don't think he's illogical.
Mm. Mm.
Who knows?
Beautiful. Well, as we start to move towards wrapping up, so first off, this has been absolutely glorious. So I'm so grateful for your time. Do you have any other thoughts or encouragements about questions that we haven't necessarily explored?
No, I think we've, aside from me spending half our time apologizing for my health, I do want to thank you for inviting me. As I said, I wanted to do this, and I was in hospital 2 weeks ago, so I'm glad to not be. I really like hospitals. To me, hospitals are like grandmothers. And, they come in the morning, how's my baby doing this morning? And you remember your grandma, you just feel so good about it. And I think I'm doing better. I'm not worried, but I would hope to do better. So I'm taking another antibiotic and stuff. I think we've asked good questions. I don't have any bucket list, but if I did, it would be to beat Bobby Flay. Yeah, I just, it's the one thing that I thought, would I love to be on Beat Bobby Flay? And I think I could.
I know that you enjoy cooking, that much for sure. So
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Is there a particular recipe? Now, I don't want to give him any cues in case he's listening. Is there a particular cuisine that you think that you could just crush him at?
Oh, well, of course, Southern. And okay. I don't think there is any white person who fries chicken better than a black woman. So it'd probably be fried chicken. But I've been grilling lamb chops lately, and I must say I've been knocking the crap out of them. They are so good. But, it's all fun. And I love the cooking shows because they don't scare you. They don't give you bad dreams. And you watch some of those cooking shows, and then you're like, I'm starving. And you go out and cook something. It's fun. I mean, we eat food, so we may as well enjoy the preparation of it. And, of course, food is one of the ways we communicate love to each other. I mean, that is one of the nicest things. As I don't know, I'm not going to pick on white people about this, but I know for black women, if whatever they put on the table, you not only eat it, but you tell them it's good. And if you don't, you're going to have a real problem. You sincerely
Right.
will.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful.
yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Where is the best place for folks to learn more about what you're excited about?
I don't know. The
Okay.
library.
Okay.
The
Library.
best thing is to allow yourself to have curiosity, to not push your curiosity down. And I think if I was given advice, which I'm not actually given advice, but you can't be trapped by the people that you think you're kin to because you were born in that family. I think it's so important to recognize you can't do anything about where you were born, but you can do something about your friends. So I think forget your family half the time and pick your friends, and you'll be a happy person.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I think that's a great spot to wrap up. So, Miss Nikki, Miss Giovanni,
Nikki,
thank you for sharing your experiences and how questions have played such a role in your life and career. This truly has been a joy. So thank you for being a part of the Curated Questions family and community. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Very good. I'm grateful to those who have joined us on the other side of the speakers. Thank you for being here. This conversation was all that I was hoping it would be. Nikki applied her decades of experience in poetic creativity and deep thinking to the subject of questions and provided priceless nuggets for us to collect as our own. Now it's our opportunity to apply the inspiration of Miss Nikki Giovanni to our own lives. Please take all you have learned here and be a light to yourself and those around you. Gratitude shout out to Beauty Pill for the show's music and producer Ben Ford for the technical help. This episode was recorded on Piscataway land. Please engage with this episode in some manner. Download, follow, save, like, share, or comment about something that resonated. This simple action will ensure we are engaging the questioning community. Until next time, keep questioning.